Welcome to Changing the Narrative. I'm Cheryl L. Cates, Esquire, and I'm going to be co-hosting a three-part series along with my co-host, H. Bosh Jr. Do you want to tell them about the media company that's co-sponsoring this event, H. Bosh?
You know what? I'm going to let my able-minded, look at him getting shy,
What?
engineer.
What?
All right. This will be produced and distributed by ReMoh Media,
Media.
engineered.
Feared by C. McPherson,
All right.
That's right.
In Schenectady, New
New
York.
York.
All right. And this is going to be the place where Mr. Hamilton is going to make his next visit. All right.
That's right.
I'm
That's
pressing you
right.
with that, brother. And listen, if you leave here hungry, it's going to be your own fault because we're going to feed you. Right.
I
Both
want
of them.
food too, and
Yeah.
so does Michelle.
Yep.
So, changing
And,
the
we're back.
narrative is
We have a great panel again. We have Michelle Bonet. We have the Honorable Cheryl Cates, one of the best legal minds in the country, and the Honorable Derrick Hamilton, who is a recognized, nationally recognized criminal justice advocate. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Salute.
All right.
so, and we got Michelle Bonet with us.
Yeah,
The
I said that. Yep.
owner of NYS DOCCS Federal Oversight Facebook group, which I'm also an administrator. And we're about to chop it up. This is a three-part series. It's going to be about violence in prison. And it's ironic that we're filming today because a new incident occurred yesterday. So there's a riot going on as well. So I think for me, when we're doing this change in the narrative, it's because we're trying to portray credible accounts of what's really going on and allow people that are in the trenches that know how it is in New York State prisons to be able to talk about the things and educate people that may not be as familiar. Because that's what was starting in October when we started doing this. The general public is not aware of what goes on in New York State prisons. It's been my experience that they don't concern themselves with it until one of their family members ends up in prison themselves. So I think we'll start off like, H. Bosh, why don't you talk about your experience, why you do this work as well with us as an activist, and what your experience was in the criminal justice system in Albany, New York.
Thank you so much. Oftentimes I put my experience to the back burner because I'm so focused on the here and now and hearing everybody else's story, specifically wrongfully convicted. But my story starts briefly. I was not wrongfully convicted. I was wrongfully prosecuted. But as we all know, the criminal justice system changed the trajectory of my life as just as much as someone who was wrongfully convicted. I can't relate to someone who was wrongfully convicted because fortunately I didn't do, but I only did 2 days in jail. I was fortunate enough to have the resources to mount an adequate defense. Long story short, back in 2005, I was the owner of H. Bosh Moving and Storage. This was the largest minority-owned moving company in upstate New York. I had 12 workers, 3 trucks, and making literally $500,000 a year. I was at my house planning on emceeing a gospel program that night, smelled smoke. 15 minutes later, my house went up in flames, lost everything I owned. I, at that time, was a victim. 6 weeks later, I went from victim to defendant. They arrested me, charged me with arson. I was facing 7 felony counts. They charged me with arson, burning down my own building. 2 years later, by God's grace and mercy, I went to trial after spending upwards of $200,000 of my own money. I went to trial, 3-week trial. And mind you, I was very, very well known in my community. So the judge said at that time, I've never seen it take this long to pick a jury because I knew everybody. I was a very well-respected businessman, a leading employer in the area. After 3 weeks, I was acquitted. I was found not guilty, but it still changed the trajectory of my life. You know, I wasn't wrongfully convicted. I was wrongfully prosecuted. And I set out to change. I said, I want to make the system better. I couldn't make it better for myself, but I wanted to make it better for my grandkids. So your son, your father, your daughter, your uncle. So when they entered this system, I wanted to make them feel that they had every right afforded to them to defend themselves. So that's what my experience was. And it led me to criminal justice reform. And I'm here with the rest of you guys, fighting the fight in the trenches each and every day. And again, I've been so blessed to meet Cheryl, Michelle, and now you, brother, or Mr. Hamilton. It's an honor and a privilege, because I could very well be, as you know, in a 6x9 cell for the rest of my life for something I did not do. He spared me for a reason. And every day I strap up my boots and I try to give back. There you go.
Love it.
And we have Derrick Hamilton with us, and we're going to let Derrick tell us what brought him into being involved in this criminal justice advocacy as well. Derrick?
Well, I was wrongfully convicted. I spent over 30 years of my life in New York State prisons. When I was there, I ran into a lot of other people who were in prison for crimes that they didn't commit or crimes that they did commit and just didn't get justice throughout the criminal justice system. Injustice system, I should say. Being in prison, I realized what was terribly wrong. And that was that the prison guards, the people who were put there supposed to protect and serve, was the most biggest gang there was. They was perpetrating more violence than anybody else. They was abusing people, and that the rules and regulations just didn't make sense, right? When you got a rule book that tells me that I can't share a sandwich or a piece of fruit or anything with my neighbor, yet and still you want me to come home to be a pro-social individual, yet and I can't be a pro-social individual in prison, bothered me. The fact that there was so much abuse, there was so many people coming in that was convicted on lies. Like you could read the transcript and say, how did this happen? How did this guy get convicted? How did the jury find him guilty? And then I realized that if the system was to change, it would have to take people like me, people who were directly impacted by it, people who can get out and tell their stories and get out and fight like hell to change the system. Because often we in prison, we want people on the outside to do so much, and they got to work and they got lives to live. So, I was one that, recognized that if I ever got out of there alive, which I did, that I was going to hit the ground running and I was going to knock on every door and I was going to do everything in my human powers to free other people and let the world know that the system was abusing us at an alarmingly high rate, convicting innocent people at a highly alarming rate. And more than anything, it was operating in the manner which it was designed to do, treat us like slaves. So knowing all of that, I had to get out here, fight like hell to help some people that was disenfranchised and left behind enemy lines.
Okay, Michelle, tell us your story.
Well, I wasn't wrongfully convicted. I was rightfully convicted. However, I was wrongfully charged with a situation while I was in there that displayed the injustices that go on within the prison disciplinary system. I spent 18 months trying to earn my trailers. And when I earned them, I was the victim of a false positive drug test. It was a system that was implemented.
Can I interrupt you?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell them what trailers are? Because not everyone watching
Sure.
will know what that means.
So FRP is a family reunion program, and it's designed to allow you opportunity to spend time with your family in a home setting. It is on the facility of a prison, but it's not, you're isolated from the actual prisoners. It's very homey. And there I was with my family enjoying something that was very hard to earn, those 18 months to earn them. And I got pulled off my trailer and thrown in shoe and told I had taken a drug that I'd never heard of before. And thus began my understanding of just truly how unjust the Tier 3 disciplinary system is. I was really trying to mind my own business and go in and come out the other side. And if somebody like myself, who was a grown woman, can't go in through prison, follow every rule, be a model inmate, and come out the other side without doing 79 days in shoe, then there's no hope for anybody. And that really bothered me. I was a teacher's assistant, and I had helped the ladies at Albion Correctional Facility earn their GEDs so that when they got out of prison, they would have education under their belt. And while I was in SHU reading all of the documentation that I needed to read to challenge this situation, all I could think about was my students who were just struggling to learn to read. And you know how everybody else, they would be so much more disadvantaged, and I was already disadvantaged. Old fashioned SHU, you know, no tablets, nothing. So when I got out, I didn't want people to feel the way that my family felt in not being able to have resources. My husband couldn't find an attorney to help me. He didn't know what to do to help the situation. And it's, you know, there's this huge disconnect between families on the outside and what goes on the inside and the knowledge. I think other than freedom, the hottest commodity in prison is really information, because you need it to navigate all the things that you confront while you're in there. And it's hard to get. You know, a lot of people don't really understand how to use the resource of the law library. And well, so when I went through that whole situation, I came out the other side having worked in the law library, basically a jailhouse attorney, like they like to call us jailhouse lawyers. And I created a group on Facebook called New York State Docs Federal Oversight. In my time there, I realized that the connecting thread that could really dismantle this situation was federal oversight. And I had seen it used in other prison systems. And so, you know, for me, I did take marketing when I was younger, and I thought, well, what am I trying to achieve? And that's the name of this group. And I started offering it as a resource to families, friends, people that I knew. The prison wives group started joining, and we created a collective under a common cause, which is, I believe that if those antiquated, definitely tilted rules that afford the Department of Corrections so much more than the incarcerated individuals, if those horrible rules were actually followed, just based on that, 60% of the problem would go away. But there's genuinely no adherence. There's no adherence to this. And when you look at things on paper, they visually appear much more judicial than they actually are. They appear fair. There's these systems, there's grievance, there's tier 3. But when you start to dissect these directives one at a time, you realize that they are they're subversively written. They are absolutely deliberately vague. And, you know, even with that, if they were followed, I think a lot of the issues would go away. But, you know, there's a whole set of de facto rules that really go on in there that they're not acknowledged out here. You know, the reality that you don't ask that night shift officer for toilet paper because he really just wants to sleep all night. He doesn't want any drama. It's like there's a lot of narrative that goes on in prisons that people aren't aware of. And my goal was to take that information and disseminate it. And it's been a really powerful thing. It really has, especially in the wake of all of the tragedy recently and all the violence that has gone on in the prisons, which is always framed from the perspective as it's violence that's incarcerated individual incited. So the goal, and why I love Cheryl's idea of changing the narrative, is the goal is really to now that we have families engaged and we have a place where they know they could go and get reliable information. Now, like, could the press come and visit us a little bit? Could other people come and take a look? Because I think that it's interesting when we get the families together that we start to identify all the trends that go on. You know, what are they doing in this prison? That, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, that information starts to yield itself just by the power of bringing people together. So that's what I've been doing. And that's my mission, is to continue to offer as much information as I can to anybody that we can impact to make appropriate change for New York State's Department of Corrections.
So what's brought the issue of violence in New York State prison to the forefront is that an incarcerated individual who was incarcerated at Mohawk and then taken to Marcy was basically, again, I'll make a disclaimer, I am a defense attorney, so everyone is innocent until proven guilty. However, there's a video, and the video that was disseminated, it was passive footage on 4 body cameras of correctional officers, and basically they murdered somebody and they got caught on film. There were nurses standing there, sergeants, just acting like it was everyday, normal, as they murdered somebody on film. So, what I want to do first is just ask everybody what their reaction was the first time that they saw this video. I'll tell you, if you go to look for it, if you haven't seen it yet, be wary. It's very triggering. It's very upsetting. So if you haven't seen it yet, know that when you go look at it, it's very traumatizing. So Bosh, what was your first thought when you saw the video of Mr. Brooks being murdered by correctional officers?
First, it was painful. Why? I have a very large amount of family members who work as correctional officers. So I want to say this too. I like to think the majority of correctional officers, and of course, Mr. Hamilton, you can weigh in on this, strap up their boots every day and they go in there to do the right thing. I don't think all of them, are like those animals that we saw on film, because I know several, and I've spoke at the Black Correctional Officers annual reunion. They are hardworking individuals and they don't condone activities or behavior like that. I thought it was appalling. And I also thought that this is what we caught on film. Imagine what we don't catch on film. It's kind of like
Exactly.
the Derrick Chauvin
Yep.
incident. All right, people say, oh my God, that is outrageous. It's absolutely appalling. Yeah, well, for every one we catch on film, there's probably 15 or 20, am I right, Mr. Hamilton, that go on that we don't catch, So that really drew my attention to it, that not only should they be held accountable, but we need systemic changes through the whole system.
Can you tell us what you thought, Derrick, when you saw it?
I thought that those officers should be held accountable immediately, that the public should be appalled in knowing that people that they hired, people that they elected to do the right thing, can go brutally and beat somebody to death, and that they're not immediately locked up, right? The fact that they wasn't walking out in handcuffs the very next day, the fact that the governor and Oversight had this document, his videos for a little bit of time, and then decided to give it to the public. It was just taking too long for accountability. And I felt straight up like those bastards should be under the jail, that they should be hung from somewhere and treated the way they treated Mr. Brooks. I immediately wanted justice for him and his family. It was appalling to me. It was disgusting.
Can I ask you also, Mr. Hamilton, is it true what I said?
His mic muted.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Hamilton, yeah, for every
Right.
one we catch, there's probably 5 or 6 we don't catch, right?
That is absolutely the fact that it was on video, right, is the only reason why we having the conversation, right? The fact that there's been so many deaths unreported and the cause being mentioned as unknown. They don't know how these people died, right? That's what would have happened in Mr. Brooks' case. They'd have put down, they didn't know how he died, right? It was an unknown death, right? The fact that the unions is not more upset, right, and didn't immediately take action against their members and say, look, we're not about this. These guys should go to jail. And I think that there should be an investigation to all those other deaths when family members were complaining and said their loved ones were killed in prison and they went down as unknown. I think having it on video opened the eyes what we already knew. We already knew this was happening. We was complaining about it. We was arguing against it. The fact that the Attorney General was defending these same officers in lawsuits, right? It shows that taxpayers' money was being spent to defend criminals should stop. So I think it really showed us how messed up our system was, and it's given us the power we need to change it.
Wow.
Okay, Michelle, you're next. What did you think when you saw the video?
You know, I try not to be a cynical person, I really do, but I can't unsee what I've seen. And I did do
Absolutely.
a significant amount of time in Orleans. And there are good people. They really are. But there's a culture, and that culture dominates the tone of a prison compound. And so when I saw it, having been in that environment, and in a way, when you're incarcerated and you go to medical, you're in such a vulnerable position to begin with. You don't know if they're really going to help you. You don't know if they're going to take care of you. You don't know if, and it's like, it's always a last, believe me, you go there last. You try and do everything yourself as much as possible and go to medical as little as possible. And to be honest, my one prayer throughout my entire incarceration was, please don't let me get sick in here. Because,
Right.
So knowing just that feeling existing when you're in that space, me watching that in that space was traumatic. Because first of all, you're watching something that you can't undo. You're watching something that you can't stop. You're watching something that you pray every day doesn't really happen. You're watching your worst fear happen as a family member. I watch that, and I there is a cynical part of me that can objectively view this material for the infractions. It's part of my skill set, what I do. Having worked in corrections and kind of monitoring how they really do what they do and what they say they do. And so in essence, I wasn't surprised.
Right.
I was just horrified at the prospect of actually witnessing what I knew already happened. I've heard these stories. I work with people who they're very much like, my family was when I was in my situation, and they didn't know who to go to or where to get help. There's just a certain set of names that kind of float around, and you hear them, and people call people and try and figure it out. And I get those calls all the time, these horrible calls. And, it always strikes me that there's no like that phone. There's no like hotline.
Right.
There's no like, I just got a phone call about an impending horrible situation or a potentially having just occurred situation. And I can't call 911, right, for that person. I can't like, you're calling OSI is like, you might as well put your wish on a balloon, tie it and let it go and hope it gets somewhere. Like genuinely, it's like, it's disturbing to know that there's no one place that you can go to and
to get help.
To get help. So when I watched it, it's just, it created the visual of what already I've heard depicted in tales from family members, in JPay messages that I get from people, just text messages. I mean, anybody who gets my number, I get like, horrific messages at odd hours with no recourse other than to call my friend Cheryl and say, honey, what do I do about this? And you really, really feel as though when you're the person that knows this information, you feel as though you're their lifeline. Like you're like, this, you don't know who else knows this. You don't know how far anybody else that knows this is willing to go to assist somebody in these situations. And it's like, it's not PTSD because it's not post, it's like traumatic stress disorder over and over. Part of what I hope to do is buffer that for families. I've already endured it. Try not to hold on to as much of it as you have to, and let me try to do that work for you, because it's such a visceral thing when people are in the situation. I can't imagine what this man's family watching this video. These were the things I was thinking when I was watching it, other than sheer nausea, and sadness, but I don't have any more tears to cry.
Right. I have a different perspective because I am also a licensed practical nurse with a specialty in brain injury trauma. So for me, watching the nurses stand there and snicker and smile and laugh was disturbing. I also recognize that he was already compromised by the time that those videos started recording, because if you watched closely, there was no sound, so we couldn't hear anything. But if you watch closely, he wasn't reacting to being beaten. He wasn't doing anything that people would normally do if they're defending themselves, or cowering when he's knowing the blows are going to come in or whatever. He wasn't doing any of that. Like, it was almost like he had no reaction to it. So as a nurse, that makes me think something else happened to him prior to what we're seeing on the video, because they were basically
Absolutely.
tossing him around like a rag doll.
Well,
Um,
the people I've
you didn't
talked to
even
have
see him
said
like
that
flinching. You know what I mean?
when he's getting picked up at the Sally Port, he's already,
Yeah.
and it's clear that, and my hope is that they will look to get obviously all of that footage that led up to it, because as I know there are cameras all over the facility. And there's cameras on walkways, there's cameras in hallways, so there's more than body cameras. And clearly something happened
But they
very
all know
violently to him.
medical is where there isn't. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, something clearly violently happened
There's
to him.
none in the room.
No, there's no compassion. I mean, it's just sad. And I have seen
Right.
that that attitude, which is really sad. It's sick.
So we saw an emerging issue from this, which there's no question that there isn't racism involved all through the New York State criminal justice system. There's been reports about the disciplinary system is disparate. There's been reports about parole board decisions. And there's also other things. But when you're looking at these numbers, statistically, we have to acknowledge that one fact is true, that there's a larger proportion of minorities, African Americans and Hispanics in the prison system due to the way that, people are being prosecuted. So when we look at an issue like what we're talking about with what happened with Mr. Brooks, obviously we couldn't hear any audio to know if any racial slurs were being said. But this issue has come up in the New York State DOCCS Federal Oversight Group, where I don't want to say playing the race card, but it's kind of like the race cards get played a little bit. And I don't know if I'm convinced that this was a racially motivated, and what everyone's thoughts are about how did race play into Mr. Brooks's murder.
I like to say I want to go right back to the prisons and violence thing, and this
Right.
is directed towards Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, how old were you when you first went in to the system?
First time I went upstate was 17 years old, 18 years old.
Okay, so let's stop right there. When you first witnessed violence at that level, what was your thought process? Because, how did you think, what am I going to do to survive this? What was your thought the first time you witnessed that type of violence?
It was scary, number one, because, I was on Rikers Island and it was black guards, black correction officers at that time, right? And they would beat us, man, like brutally, right? Brutally beat us when we had encounters with each other, right? So, it was just insane to know that this was the type of corporal punishment, the discipline that they was giving young kids for being young kids. We were just young knucklehead kids getting in stupid fights, fighting each other for whatever reason it may be, just because we was ignorant. But instead of somebody sitting down talking to us or giving us guidance, they was violently dealing with us, and it made us in terms become more violent, right? It made us become more violent against them and against each other. I remember one time when the riot squad came and I called myself not fighting back. right? That was the worst beating I ever got because I didn't fight back. And from that point, I pledged that I'm going to fight back every single time because I got a better chance of surviving by fighting back than not fighting back, right? So, I mean, you are shocked, right? And because no matter how many grievances I wrote or how many complaints I wrote to Inspector General, only that day was invite another fight. It didn't deter them. It made them come back and want to fight me again, right? So I was just shocked that there was nobody that cared, and that we was being beaten so unceremoniously until we had to take matters in our own hand. It was just culturally shocking to me to see that my own black people would do this to me. But then when I got upstate and seeing it being done from farmers, from individuals that had never been around black people before, the hatred was that much more. Not just the
So
abuse,
deep rooted,
but the
right?
hatred. And
Because they
it
didn't
was
know.
just so,
They didn't know our
right,
culture,
right.
All they
So
knew
it
is
was
what
just
they see, perp walks. Yeah.
right.
They
Well,
didn't know that there
that's
was a thriving black middle class. They just knew perp walks and what they got, right?
Yep, exactly. You know, that was my shock when I got upstate, was really how little exposure the community had had. It was how not diverse it was. But you know, this all speaks to the fact that there's a culture of violence that permeates beyond race in prison. And that's like what Cheryl was talking about statistically. Yes, there are more black and brown people incarcerated in the male system on the men's side.
Right.
But you know, I think that there is the same way that there is that perception of you are a criminal toward brown and black people, they still feel that way about white people too. You are a criminal. It's, you know, that's black, white, brown guards, black, white, brown incarcerated individuals. The true defining line is being an incarcerated individual, because as Derrick mentioned, you know, you still have this culture even in places where the officers are the same color as you. I'm a Puerto Rican woman, right? And it's like, you know, it didn't change. Actually, in the female facilities, the female officers were the worse with us than the male officers. So, you know, there's a culture that if we can't discuss it, we cannot resolve it. And that's the problem, is everybody, it's so visceral, these things. It's so real, these things. And, you know, our policies have to be driven by, you know, real things. You know, we have corporations that have executives that have, you know, all sorts of information. When they want to make their company go in the direction they want to make their company go, damn sure it will. And they will raise revenue even when, you know, the markets fall, right? Because they are worried about this, they're producing stock for their business. So it's like, I feel like prison, it shouldn't be considered a business with regard to corporations. It should be considered something that adheres to what we know in social sciences, what we know about human development, what we know about the socioeconomic issues that drive incarceration and arrests in our communities based on the, you know, it's like, I don't understand why, you know, one thing happens and everybody flocks. And then, yes, it does, it has to some degree become a racial issue. And I understand that the African American community, Black and Brown community, is angry about what happened to their person, and rightfully so. But when things get polarized in that capacity, we lose our ability to discuss it in a way that's productive and constructive. And that's, you know, and that happens. That's why you see infighting, even in organizations, because everybody forgets what the mission is. And the mission is to make the place better, you know, and to really discuss what is actually happening. Not, well, we don't want to talk about it because it makes me look bad. The union having all control over these facilities, and Albany trying to pretend like they have control when we know it's the union. Like, we're talking about falsehoods, and then we're trying to create truthful reality. And that can't come from that. That has to come from really speaking about things in terms of statistics and empirical fact, and really grounded in things like trauma-based care. You know, everybody in prison is traumatized. And you sit there and they come out more traumatized. And 80% of people are coming home. Our society hasn't really accepted that. 80% are coming home, and they're going to either come home and contribute, or they're going to come home and need even more services in mental health because of what's gone on in there to them.
Oh, I totally agree. Going back to you, Mr. Hamilton, and I say this with all due respect, you don't appear to seem like the type of brother that you needed the yard to be hard. You seem like you could handle yourself, before you went in. You seem like that type of relative. If I had as a relative, I would say to one of my tenants, "So you're not going to pay me my rent? All right, let me go get my cousin Derrick. All right, you ain't going to pay me
He's
my
a
rent? No
gangster.
problem. Let me go get my cousin. No, don't go get Derrick. Here's your rent right here." So I say that you don't seem like you needed the prison to make you hard in the yard. You could handle yourself. But even with that, it was still a culture shock because 17 is 17. You doing what 17-year-olds do. And then you get thrust into this pool, this
Stop it.
culture of violence where it's either you get or get got, and your mind as a 17-year-old, you're still processing. And you got to figure out, how am I going to survive this for the next several years? And my hat's off to you. My hat's off to you, Michelle, when you witness it, because it's a shock that
I
you ain't
was
done.
I was in Albion I finally landed in the place where I was going to be living, and that was Albion Correctional Facility. And I was in reception for a minute, and then they put me in my regular bunk. I was in 48 top, and I'll never forget it. My first or second night there, this girl came in, went through the rec, went in, came back out, grabbed a can top, and started chasing this girl around the rack. And I was watching the whole thing from 48 top, going, what? Now, thank God I grew up in the Bronx. I try to keep my pinky up when I drink my tea, but I'm not a pushover. And I did go in there as an adult. So again, Derrick being so young going in, I understand. I had a younger brother who was in Spofford. So, I understand the challenges of the youth being incarcerated, especially as a teacher's assistant. I had the under 21 class and I was their teacher's assistant.
So let me
Those
ask
kids.
you, and I'll stay with you, Michelle. How do you learn? There's no blueprint on that.
Mm-mm.
So and Mr. Hamilton, you got to watch out who you trust, right? So how do you get your footing to say, all right, here's something that I need to do? Nobody's going to walk up and say, hey, here's the blueprint on how to survive in this jungle, So what's some of the things you do to acclimate yourself to that environment? You, Mr. Hamilton.
For me, again, I was from Bedford-Stuyvesant, I was in Brooklyn, so there was always a lot of my homeboys that was already incarcerated that's going to school you when you get to Rikers Island. But when I went upstate, I gravitated to a lot of the older guys. And at that time, you had more people coming right out of the civil rights movement. You had a lot of people that was Muslim and had different ideologies. But more than anything, man, the old timers would tell you what to do. And one of the things I remember when I first got to Clinton Correctional Facility, there was a riot in the yard and the guards were shooting and they was making everybody crawl on the floor. And there was an old timer by the name of Rasu. And I never forget this brother, Rasu, God bless him. May he rest in peace. He was running behind guys, kicking them in the ass, saying, stand up, be a man, stand up, be a man, stand up, be a man. So it was guys like Rasu, man, who really taught us what manhood was about, right? And how you had to stand up for what you believe in. And, I remember the first time I went to Attica was 1990. It was a riot then. They had killed the guy, and everybody was outside protesting in the yard because they had ran the guy head through the glass. And dudes stayed outside for 2 days protesting. Then everybody came in, and I was getting called on a visit that particular day. And I just got to Attica. I probably was there 2, 3 days and right into the midst of this big riot. And they isolated. One thing they do good in these male prisons is they isolate you when everybody go out. So let's say it's a group of 40 y'all. They say you get on the wall, everybody else go out. Now you there with 15 of them, right? With their sticks wrapped around their hand like they want to bust you in their head. And he said, look at his name tag. His name is Hamilton. And he said, Joe, we're going to check your name tag. If your ID number matches who we looking for, we're going to kill you, right?
Wow.
He looked through the Rolodex.
Wow.
I was scared to death, right? He looked through the Rolodex and he said, you lucky today, it's not you.
Wow.
Right? So in that moment, again, it's 15 and me, right? And they got sticks, they got everything, right? You're going to fight, you're going to do what you can. But that was the first time I was ever really in a facility like this where guards had their sticks. They wrapped the rope around their sticks in their hand in Attica. And this is how they walk, right? Some of them have them up on their shoulder like a baseball bat, right? You never see that type of encounterment till you go to these joints and you see a black prison guard on preacher arm hanging on a rope, right? So you know the racism is real, right? You know it's real from the moment you get there to the moment you leave, right? They let it be known that they are racist, they don't like you, and that every opportunity they get, they're looking to create a scenario where prisoners go against prisoners, right? They create a SPACs against blacks,
Divide and
right?
conquer, basically.
Yeah, divide and conquer all day long, right? And this is what they do. They go to this guy's a rat, this guy's a snitch, and let somebody go out with a knife deliberately to stab him, right? So when you see these things, right, and you watch how they play each other, everybody against each other, just so that they can go on the news and say this place is violent. They'll beat somebody then to the death, and the next news article you'll see is that they was attacked and they
Yep.
need more help because the prisoner was violent.
So
Right? So
basically,
when
they
you
changed the narrative.
they change the narrative real well, right?
Mhm.
And when you
Exactly.
you say, "Wow, man, this is what I'm up against. Like, what can I do? What can little old me do?"
And in
Right? And
changing
this,
that narrative, that gives them free reign to do what they want because they say, if we need to deal with these animals, so you got to give us more leverage,
Right.
because this place we go in, we fear for our life, we may not come home. John Q. Public will say, "Do what you got to do," basically.
right,
And
Wink,
that's
wink. They
basically
look
how
the
they
other
get
way.
away with it.
Yeah, when
That's
it's
essentially it.
totally the opposite.
Right. You'll see one story about a failed parolee who's, some horrendous thing has happened. And you don't hear the stories of the 30 people out there who are really trying to,
Okay.
get back home and get their life get on their feet. It's horrible. And the thing is, and I've taken the press to challenge on this because I've asked them genuinely, are you going to continue to report union press releases as fact? Because the same way that you would investigate it as a responsibility of the press, same way you would investigate any other story before you report it as fact, this is just a statement coming from the people that are in charge there. There truly is no longer checks and balances anywhere within the system. So, it's I think there, but for the grace of God, we all go. Honestly,
Ooh,
the
well said.
tablets,
Well said.
the tablets being in prison is the changer. And I said this before, there is a difference between having two payphones and a phone list or a phone line and a certain amount of time per person, right? Then everybody in those units being able to use those phones, that information is going to start to get out. And no sooner did it start happening, boy, do we get information. I asked a whistleblower CEO who remains anonymous I asked
Mhm.
the person, genuinely, like, could the culture ever change? Like, really? Like, do you think it could? She said, well, how else is the prison going to run?
Right.
And
That.
and I was just like, okay. And then I spoke to a few more CEOs, some met, and this is the consensus amongst the staff that are there or have been there, is that even if one single person wanted to change, how challenging that is.
Mm.
I've been introducing this concept of the growth of the prison, and these were once isolated prison towns where these officers were assigned to far away from their homes. They had to share apartments out there for their shifts. Over, I'd say, 3 decades, that has changed radically. These places are prison towns. So you are
Mm.
working with people who your kids are going to school with them. They're in 4-H together, which I didn't know really what that was until I was all the way so far north that I thought I was Canadian. I damn near thought they were going to turn me over to the Mounties. I never seen so many cornfields in my life. And we just kept going and going. But the point is, if you see something and you go against the grain, that's not just going to affect you there in the prison with your
Mm-mm.
job. You're talking about now, you may not get a dental appointment because that guy's daughter is the receptionist at your dentist, and they're all going to feel some sort of way. Beyond that, there is danger within. Those people, the same way that they will beat an incarcerated individual, they will beat somebody who is, not necessarily on board with their appropriate, the way that they interpret their behavior. I think it's time for the culture to change by accepting that because you are a CO does not mean that you are entitled to be part of the punishment. You are an
Right,
administrator.
absolutely.
You are an administrator of a system. Okay. So what we're talking about is a lack of professionalism, a lack of oversight. So everybody's just got to get on board with doing their job. And they're not like that because that's not what they signed on for. They signed on for what they saw their parents get and their parents get before, which is easy, cushy jobs. You just sit around, you make sure that you keep things tight, you come and go. It's insane how much of them just want to sit there with their hat down by their eyes and just be able to do their time, do their shift, and go home. And it's disgusting because it's a profession and people are affected, human beings, and they don't need to be living this way.
Cheryl?
And I think we need to cap off of that because when you think about the whole experience of going to prison, the whole experience is meant to take away your identity. You become a number. You have to do whatever they tell you, like for your photo or whatever. So you become a number. And I think that's part of what happened with this is like, do you think that maybe that was part of why these people, which is kind of hard to explain why they would do that, but do you think maybe that's part of it, that in their minds,
The
they don't see the
dehumanization.
incarcerated, yeah, they don't see the incarcerated individuals as human beings. So that allows them to act that way and do those things
Yes,
because they're
Cheryl,
not looking at
absolutely.
them.
Absolutely.
Right.
But the thing, here we go back again to step one. What bothers me about this is years ago, there was the Stanford prison experiment.
Right.
We have
Absolutely.
seen what happens in a culture where you have one group oppressing another group in a prison setting, and it begets a certain standard set of mentality and behavior that, if we are aware of, should be part of combating constantly. Processes need to change regularly. It's if we know that people put in a position of power over other people will exhibit a certain set of behaviors that are not desirable for the true rehabilitation of individuals, then we have to write into these processes methods to combat that, because we know this isn't a mystery. We know this syndrome exists where people begin to take on far beyond their role as quote unquote jailer and begin to see themselves as entitled to
Exactly.
part of the penalty.
I think a lot
And
also, go ahead, Mr. Hamilton.
No, go ahead.
no, hey, Spice, go ahead. I want to hear you.
I think a lot has to factor in. You got to realize, for example, where Mr. Hamilton went upstate, those areas, those communities are poor and destitute. If it wasn't for the prison industrial system, all right, most of them would be working at some big box. But they come into the industrial system, they have little or no education. A lot of them, and I don't mean to be cruel, can't spell mom backwards, okay? But they're making good money off the prison industrial.
Absolutely.
But
I
they
used
have
to,
not a clue of the culture they're dealing with, okay?
I agree.
So now here comes somebody like Mr. Hamilton from inner city Brooklyn or Bronx or New York, and there's a whole culture shift. So they don't take time, they don't have sensitivity training, and to be quite frank, all Mr. Hamilton is to him is, all right, a double, meaning this is a double shift, this is overtime,
Right.
or what he is time and a half.
But the
Nothing
thing
more,
is,
nothing less. All right,
I can't
I'm getting time and a
excuse
half
them.
from being. I don't care to know about him. I don't want to know about him. And then they follow the company policy. This is what you do to get through, and that just brings, eventually it's like two trains colliding, because you got, all right, Mr. Hamilton or yourself, Michelle, trying to make a way, and you're dealing with an individual who doesn't even know you. You can't even communicate with him. You have nothing in common. His virtue of fun is going out tipping cows or having a bonfire on Friday night. Mr. Hamilton's virtue of fun is going, hanging with the boys and chasing the honeys in Brooklyn, at 17, enjoying himself. And all the things that inner city kids do or inner city Black people do. You can't relate to that, And what he does know is the perp walk again. All I know is what I see on the news of him. And that's how I'm going to treat him. So,
And Michelle, if I could add, right,
Go
to
ahead.
what H. Bosh is saying, like the experiment you're talking about, Sam experiment is really good, right? It shows what we know how human beings treat human beings. But we can't take away the fact that if you exasperate that by putting these prisons in those type of areas, right? When you put them in an area where they don't just treat prisoners like this, they treat the visitors like this,
Yeah.
right? So when somebody comes up to visit, right, because they're so racist, right, because they're not used to black people coming in their neighborhood. Let's be real about this, right? It's just like they are
absolutely.
gangs. Like these prisoners, these neighborhoods, these guys are gangs. Like, make no mistake about it. Attica had the Black Glove Gang, right? They was the biggest gang in the facility, right? And they was beating people up because they wanted everybody to know that they was the toughest gang in the facility. That ain't none of y'all tougher than us. And then you got to look at the fact that a lot of their fathers died in the Attica riot. So they felt like they
Right,
had something to
right.
prove.
Well said. And they still are
Now they had
harboring that
something to prove.
animosity. Yeah, because a lot
Absolutely.
of them went down or were
Right.
disabled for life. That is so, so true. So you got a legacy, yeah,
Right.
of animosity.
Now you got to live up. You got to live up to your father's reputation. If he was in there beating up people,
Yep,
right? You got to live
yep.
up to that, right? I'm gonna tell you one thing I heard, and I'm gonna let somebody else go. I remember sitting in the cell one day and watching a new young rookie come to the facility, and I heard the old timer God tell him, "Forget what you was told in training. Forget everything they told you."
Come
He
on
said,
now.
"If these guys get out of line, you take this stick and you hit them upside the head." You hear what I'm telling you? This rookie was so afraid and scared. Listen to this old timer tell him that. What you think he gonna do? He gonna be scared,
Absolutely.
like you said, Michelle. If he don't do it, he getting his ass whipped in the parking lot. He gonna have a problem if he don't do it, right? He's
Absolutely.
gonna have a big problem. It's the culture.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all, but I won't excuse it any longer. And the reason is because the same way that their fathers were in Attica, that's generations of Black people visiting these communities. That's generations of Black people being incarcerated in these communities. So the question, or maybe the statement more so, is it's not that they can't understand you. They have chosen not to.
Well said.
Okay, because the reality is, this is the same way that their fathers and their grandfathers, have been working the system. I was a phase
And
one facilitator,
and
and I used to
Michelle,
tell.
there's
Mhm.
no benefit to understanding you. Why? You
There
know,
you
Why
go.
should I?
because
Why do I
because
have to?
why do I need look,
Right,
look, there's conscious.
Right,
I have total power over you. Why do I
exactly.
need to
right,
understand you? Why do I have to have a dialogue with you? Why do I
right.
have to have a given? There's no give and take.
No,
There's only
no,
take.
it's
I
it's
take
and
whatever I want
it's
from
an
you and you
insane
respond.
culture, an
Yes.
insane culture. And I was just really taken aback more about stuff like that. The way that the behavior during visits, or the behavior that they interacted with civilians, like people that used to come in to teach our college program, they would treat these teachers, fine professors who were coming in and sacrificing their time to teach us, they would treat them like garbage. And it's just, again, it's the culture, but the mentality exists like generationally, and it's like
So
enough
listen,
already.
guys, in the spirit of time, can we do one more session? Are we game? Because we got right, Cheryl. Can we do one more session?
Or do you just want to wrap
Or
it?
do you want to wrap? Huh? Can we?
We can't
Cheryl?
hear you. We can't hear you.
All right, Cheryl.
You need to.
She's mute. Cheryl, you're muted.
Yeah, Cheryl.
That I could be from attorney.
Okay, so we are recording, and that was natural. Love it, love it. Yes. So Cheryl, you want to lead into this
Part
another
3.
part 3. Go ahead.
Okay, so we started to talk about this earlier about the race issue, and we got a little sidetracked about it because we did have to acknowledge it is racist in there. I had an experience at Elmira where I went in with a paralegal that was African American and a lawyer from Monroe County. We were doing a 50H hearing, and our client was African American, and we were out in the processing area. They knew it was me in there. They knew we were there. And we watched two white guards harass this white girl that was going to visit her boyfriend that was Black. And right in front of us, they said, you're going in there to visit that N-word? And we were all sitting right there. And I'm like, what did you just say to her? And they didn't care that we were there. So it's so blatantly open that they knew we were in there. And that was a Monroe County lawyer and me. Then the paralegal was there. And they were like, almost had this girl in tears. And I told them, I was like, if you say one more word to that girl when I leave this jail, I promise you, I will be on the phone with Albany and you're all going to be in trouble because you're not going to sit there and talk to her like that in front of us. Like, how dare you? And then other things I've heard too, and then I'm going to turn this back around to Robert Brooks' situation. They tell people when they get off the bus up north, the governors, the Franklins, the Clinton, the upstate, they tell them, welcome to the plantation. And they blatantly use the N-word on a regular. I've had people where they rip their dreads out of their head. Felony's saying hello right now. He's not cooperating. You're not singing.
Cheryl, you're right.
Sorry,
You're absolutely right.
edit that out. I'm sorry. But you know, what kind of crap is that? Like, you're a state employee and you think it's appropriate for you to say welcome to the plantation? Like,
Impunity.
no.
With impunity, these people behave. They feel as though they're above reproach, that they can do anything they want. And when you're in there, in those places way up where you're far away, they are.
Yeah, when you're up north.
You know, the truth is they are. They act that way because they can. And it's very, very challenging for people to advocate for themselves without retaliation. And it's a challenging thing. And the violence in there, even in the female facilities, it's not, you know, I mean, it's a small microcosm. There's only 3 in New York State, but having been in all 3 of them, I've seen some crazy stuff.
Right.
You know, so it's like it is what's sickening is, again, that there's no recourse, that it's like that it's like you're chipping away at the same stone for decades. And yeah, I get this whole idea of being so rural in a way, because I was a phase 1 facilitator, right? And you know, you asked earlier, Bosh, about, you know, the how do you get your bearings? And I had a few people that were very kind and generous in sharing what I needed to know. You know, the elder people will, you know, you pick up what they're putting down, and, you know, you use what's really applicable, and then you keep it pushing. But I definitely didn't, I understood that other people may not be as equipped to navigate that. And that was part of why I wanted to do phase 1, was to tell them things like, other than universities and hospitals, prisons are the only place to get decent jobs with benefits, right? So, you know, I needed to explain to them that, you know, everybody here is related.
Yeah,
they are.
Prison and the benefits afforded to those jobs, they would have their teeth rotted out by the time they were 21 years old, because there's no jobs in those in that area. There's no industries, you know. There are a bunch of, you know, it's just, and I say that as a fact, not being negative, you know, there's just.
No, it's the reality of rural.
The reality. But
you know,
prison, all right, that's why they fight for it, and they call it, I didn't know for a long time, why did they call it the prison industrial system? Because it provides income. You know,
course,
this is a billion-dollar industry.
Yep.
I mean, and not only that, not just for guards. Let's take a moment to think all the other industries that are
the plumbers, the electricians,
the vendors,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That, the local bars. All right, when these guys get off their shifts, you know, all right,
that's the
local
point.
Bars, the local industries that feed and eat and just, I mean, feast off the prison industrial system. You know, that's why I said this is something that is totally systemic, and they protect it with their life. As he said, you will get beat down. Either, you know, it's like this, either you get in where you fit in, or you get beat down to the point where you won't.
Basically. And the union is the hard part. The hard part is these agreements with
so
the
let me
union,
say this to both you who've been inside. If your son or daughter said, Mom, I'm really interested in making a difference, or Mr. Hamilton, if one of your children came to you and said, I want to make a difference, I want to work in the correctional system, particularly or specifically a correctional officer, along with probably saying you done lost your mind. If they did, what advice would you give them? You know, knowing what they were going into.
First of all, I would say to my kids is that if they wanted to be a babysitter, that there's better, more safe babysitting jobs out here in society where you can probably make just as much money and don't put yourself in danger, right? And then I would also say that, in my 60 years of experience, I've never, ever heard anyone tell me that, you grow up, you want to be a cop, you want to be a fireman. I haven't heard a kid yet say they want to be a correction officer. It's a fallback job, right? It's a job when a person can't get anything else. This is what they get. But what I would remind them more than anything else is the psychological damage that it does to you or it should do to a conscious person in locking somebody else in that cell, right? Because psychologically, it has to do something to you. If you find a human being that you see as decent, that you really know that's a decent human being that did something dumb and he's been in prison 30 and 40 and 50 years, it has to tear upon your soul.
One small mistake, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're going to have psychological damage done to you, right? And then you're going to bring a lot of those issues that go on in their home to your family, right? And I just think that there's more reliable, more safe, more producive and conducive jobs to have than having to depend on somebody else's misfortune, right? For you to get a come up, right? So,
For you,
I would urge them, right? I would urge them, and I'm not saying all correction. Look, I know a lot of great correction officers. And in fact, I have been in conversations where I say that sometimes that an officer should be able to defend himself, right? Because you're going to run into some people that's going to try to make you bring some drugs in or extort you as an officer, right? You're dealing with a criminal element. So don't let me say that, there shouldn't be some type of force used if necessary to defend anybody, whether you're a correction officer or incarcerated individual. 35.15 in the penal law says everybody is entitled to defend themselves reasonably when force is being used against them. So I don't think that they shouldn't, but to make a career, and I'll give you something even deeper than that. Motor vehicle, every license plate we see in the country is made in prison, right? There's no license plate manufacturing companies in society, right? Not one, not one, right?
Does that just apply to New York State, Mr. Hamilton, or every state?
All over the country.
Okay.
In every state, right? License plates is being manufactured in some correction facility or another. Yet when these guys get out, they can't get a job in DMV, right? Or a recommendation for a job in DMV, right? So, so I would tell them, look who you aligning yourself with, right? Because you got to understand what this is, right? This is a modern day plantation. As they say, welcome to the plantation. They're telling us what it really is. They're telling you what it really is. Some of these facilities are on Plantation Road or Exchange Road, like Attica has, where they're exchanging prisoners. The names are there, right? We know what it is. We know why it was designed, right? If we go back to history, we know the prisons first began when they took people out of slavery and giving them fines, right? Because they couldn't pay the fines, they get labor out of them that way. Right, they give them high excessive fines.
Started from slavery to Jim Crow, right?
Yeah,
prisons were because they needed cheap labor. When slavery ended in 1865, they said, we can't let all this free labor leave.
Yes.
So they started arresting black men specifically for jaywalking. If you spit on the street, and you would get these, as you say, draconian sentences. For spitting on the street, you would get 3 to 5 years. But that was labor, and they just transferred it from slavery to prison labor. You're exactly right, And then the police force. We all know why that was established. That was an extension of slave catchers, all right? Our modern day police force, all right?
Yep.
All right, the father of modern day policing was slave catchers, And then they just transferred it to police. So I totally agree with you, Plantation, and that's the mentality even to the day, that, what is it, prison to pipeline, I always forget the phrase,
Right, the school thing, yeah.
Yes.
School to prison pipeline.
Or this is what's really shocking. I did some work with the school district, and this teacher, and she says to me, and she was a Caucasian, but we could talk. She says, "Can I really be honest with you?" She says, there's a certain element in our society that they may look at 10 black boys, and they know at least 7 of them will be affected by the criminal justice system. Isn't that horrible?
Mm-hmm.
In our school.
Yeah.
Now you look at those same 10 white kids in a suburban district, and we know 7 of them are going to be extremely successful. 3 may be affected by the criminal justice system, but it's for some stupid stuff that mom and dad will get them off the hook. Then she says, I'll go even further. Let's take 10 girls of color. She said 6 of them will be pregnant by the time they get out of high school. You know? And it's not because our communities, our kids are slower. We don't have the resources. We don't have the community what should I say, programs. We don't have the structure. Like, for example, most of those white kids in those areas are working by the time they get to high school. All right. They got built-in structures. All right. In our communities, they know they are set up to fail. And that's something where we got to start, what's the word I want to use? Prevention instead of cure. And I'll go to you, Mr. Hamilton. What's your thoughts on prevention instead of waiting till they get in prison, you know, especially in our community?
So one of the things that I promote out here, right? I say that, I didn't get an alternative to violence program or being taught consequences, right, until I went to prison, right?
See what I mean?
So they give you all of these programs once you get in there, right? They give you all of these social awareness programs and pro-social programs, challenge to change, and everything else. When you
Cure,
get
not
behind
prevention.
bars, right? Right. And they're not giving them to these kids in schools, right? These programs should be in the public school. If we know that there's a part of the adolescent brain that don't develop until they're 25, and that part of that brain don't allow them to understand consequences, then we should be teaching them short-term, long-term consequences and all that in school, right? They shouldn't have to wait to go to prison to understand what stimulus to response is, right? And how, when they commit a crime or they do certain things, it don't only affect the person they're doing it to, but it's affecting their family and their community and all the rest of that stuff, right? So if the part of their brain is not developed to understand it, won't you think we would teach those things to them, right? That would be a part of the school curriculum so they can become aware. They don't want them to know, right? They want them to be dumb and commit these mistakes so that they can put them in prison, right? So the whole concept of look, if you can train a dog, right, and you can train anybody, right, you can train human beings to be whatever you want them to be, then why can't you help develop the mind to understand things that it don't naturally get on its own? So again, we talking about smart, intelligent people, right? They know that they can do this. And I tell the city all the time, why we don't have these same programs inside these schools? When these brothers that come home that taught these things in prison, right? And it made the public more safe because it cut recidivism down. Why don't you send them inside these schools? These young kids can relate to them, right? You got Brooklyn, they pay gang members $25 an hour from the city budget, right? To keep them out of trouble, right? It has worked to reduce the level of crime.
And I think one of the good things about those programs, again, is they see people who look like them, who talk like them, who have experienced the things that they have. Instead of having some glorified social worker comes in and does not know them, does not know the dynamics of the community, all right, did not go through what they went through, and and that's not to say that we don't need social workers or school psychiatrists, but you need someone who can sit down and talk to you that's been through it. You could relate and get to a child or a young man much faster than a social worker who has degrees dripping off the wall. You could go in there, have 5 words, and they're sitting down listening to you. When you go to speak to youth, you can say 10 words and they put down their phones, Mr. Hamilton. You know, when that social worker could be up there all day using these catchy, phrases and psychological terms and never reaches them. That's what they need. It's all about prevention, not cure. You know, I think it would serve us well. And I'll say this, all right. I often think about my engineer right here. He's 23 years old.
26.
26, excuse me. All right. So
26.
we interviewed a young man who did 26 years and he went to prison when he was 16.
15.
All right. And Caelan said, and I know it was compelling, he thought, wow, look what I was doing at 16. Because, you know, his family is successful. His mother's a doctor, his father's an attorney, and they made a great life for him. All right. You know, and look at him blushing. But at 16, Mr. Hamilton, his version of getting in trouble might have been tipping cows or stuff like that, you know? All right. But he was like, I can't even, here he is right here. He says, I can't even relate to going to prison at 16 years old because he had so many other resources, you know, living in the suburbs and just a whole different structure. And he had people, he had a system, he had a school district that encouraged, that had programs. On the flip side, we are almost set up to fail. And like I said, it was sobering when they said out of 10 black men, seven of them are going to be affected by the criminal justice system. You know, just like I went to say to one guy, a white friend of mine, he was talking about, oh man, you know, you guys, sometimes you overdo it, this, that, and the other. I said, okay. And he says his kid was getting ready to drive, getting his license. So I said, all right, let me give you this example. Your son is getting ready to get his license. What conversation do you have with your son when he's getting ready to drive? Be careful, you know, don't act a fool, don't speed, this, that, and the other. You know, I said, well, how about if he gets stopped by law enforcement? We'll just pull over and then ask the officer, why did you get pulled over? Talk to him, understand the charges, this, that, and the other. I said, you know what? Totally opposite of the conversation we have with our kids. First thing I say is when you get pulled over, have your hands on the dashboard. Try to have your wallet already out. Please try to get a wallet that is not colored black, you know, because the first thing they say, I saw a weapon. I have a whole conversation with them. And he says, I really can't believe that, you know? Yes, that's survival. That's embedded into our community, you know? That's like sliced bread. So you see how your community is totally different. But then again, all right, when you say, well, I believe in this, I believe in that, but how much do you help? You're complicit because you only say you help because you come to school every day and you do your part. But what do you really do about changing the system? You know? And I'm sure if you haven't, Michelle, you're going to have that same conversation. I know, Cheryl, you probably had that conversation with your son.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Hamilton, you probably had that conversation with your kids, right? You know?
Unfortunately, I think it's a conversation that a lot of Black and brown families have to have with their children. And well, you know what? Again, though, you could be that person who is not brown or Black, but match the certain check-off boxes that will elicit a certain set of behaviors. So if they feel like you're grimy, or they feel like you look like a junkie, or the fact is a determination is made, and generally that determination, you know, dictates the way the rest of that encounter is going to go.
Yes, it's already predetermined. You know, right. When they pull you over, they already have a predetermination, or unfortunately, perception outweighs reality. You know,
that's true.
So what do you say to your children, Mr. Hamilton?
You know, one of the things, you know, I try to teach to my kid, and I'll be honest, right? I taught my daughter since she was young, and she's 13 now, that she got the freedom of speech, right? And I come from I think that we have been indoctrinated to believe that by us being passive, that's going to deter what's happening to us every single day, right? And I noticed that assertiveness doesn't mean you got to be disrespectful, right? I teach how to be assertive but respectful, right? I do say keep your hands to a son, a young man. You should have your hands visual, right? You should always try to not be as confrontational as you could, but you should ask, what am I being stopped for? Have I done anything improper? And you stand on your rights, right? But I tell you, H. Bosh, and it's sad, but it's true. I've learned that the most nicest, humble people get abused the most, right?
Say that.
And I've learned that,
Absolutely.
and it's sad, but I teach them to be assertive, right? To stand your ground on principle, right? And just make sure that you try to pull over somewhere where there's people, right? Where you have
Right.
a crowd,
Right.
right? Don't try to isolate yourself in a situation where it's just you and them, right? And if you have to drive a little more to get to there, right? Do what you need to do, right? But immediately get on your phone today. Immediately get on your phone, immediately let that officer know that you on FaceTime with your father or you on FaceTime with your mother or with your neighbor, and that
Right.
somebody is listening to this conversation. It's not just you and them. And you can say, look, when I pulled over, I immediately called whoever it was I had to call because I want this conversation recorded, right? So that in itself would be a deterrent. And thank God for phones today, right? But I
Amen.
tell them to let them know that
Absolutely.
this conversation is being recorded, that I'm being respectful, that I don't have any weapons, I don't have anything that might even make you think it's a weapon, that I'm humbling myself and I'm going to answer all your questions, but I would like to know why I'm being pulled over, right? And you start the conversation out that way so that they know that they're being recorded and they know that everything they say will be held against their ass the same way they tell it to you, right? Let them know that. And again, be respectful, but be assertive. Stand on your rights. And I explain to them what their rights are, right? You got the right to know what you're being pulled over for,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's your right, right? You got the right to know what you did or what they want to check you out for, right? And don't be argumentative. Just let them put it on their body cam or on your phone, whatever they're going to tell you, right? And if they say, I don't got to tell you nothing, right? Then again, you know that was recorded, sir, right? Be respectful, but be
Because
assertive.
sometimes their arrogance will say, "You don't question me. I dare you."
Listen, I've
Right.
had that as a grown man,
Okay.
right? I give you an example. One
Speak
day
to
I was
that.
pulled over. I was pulled over on New Jersey. I stopped at had to go to the bathroom bad, pulled over in the rest stop, ran into the place, used the bathroom, came out. There was a young cop, white male, flashing a flashlight in the back of my vehicle. I said, "Can I help you, sir?" He said, "Yes, you didn't pull into the white lines." Right. And I said, "Sir, I was running to go to the bathroom. I didn't even give a damn about a right line. I didn't want to pee on myself." Right? I said, "That's all it was." He says, "Well, I think you've been drinking." Right? And I says, "Okay, I understand your thoughts, but I haven't been drinking and I'm going to leave." He says, "You're not going anywhere until you give me a breathalyzer." And I said, "Listen, sir, first of all, you haven't seen me drive this vehicle. You haven't even seen me in the vehicle. You came, the vehicle was parked, right?" I said, "I'm refusing the breathalyzer, but I'm giving you my hands, right? If there's something to arrest me for, here, arrest me, take me on about my way so I can get out, right?" I said, we went back and forth for 45 minutes because he kept telling me, "I'm the authority here. And I'm telling you what you're gonna do. And I said, "Sir, I know you're the authority, but in all respect, I'm telling you, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that." But we went back for 45 minutes until one of his
Because you
supervisors came.
question his authority, plain and
Yes,
simple.
plain
Yep.
and simple.
And indirectly his manhood.
Yes,
Let's just say
yes,
it right.
yes.
Right. A black man questioning me are my authority and my manhood.
Yes.
And that's what just took it a whole different direction. Because
30 minutes, 45 minutes, back and forth. Right? He said, "I want to do you a
so
favor." He said, "I'm doing you a favor." I said, "Please don't do me a favor. Just arrest me if I did something wrong and let me go. I'm
just
not
to
looking
show
for a
who's
favor."
in charge.
That's it. That's
So
it.
Cheryl, we got about 9 minutes. You want to wrap this up because I mean first of all, I love this energy. All right. I thank you, Michelle. Okay. Mr. Hamilton, you are part of the family now. Okay. You are part of the Made to Believe LLC network, ReMoh Media family. Okay. You got a standing invitation to come here whenever you want. And I told you, if you come here, you're not going to leave hungry. All right. And Michelle, thank you. We got some great footage in, so you might want to just wrap it up so we can close it out. Yeah.
Well,
I think
just
I want 2
thank you.
minutes though first.
All right.
I
Okay.
just want to say thank you guys for having this conversation. It's, you know, it's always good to get perspective, and it's been an interesting conversation to be able to help change the narrative. You know.
Great, great. And Mr. Hamilton, you're going to hear from me too, because I want to talk to you more about my case, arson, and like you said, your case made case law, so did mine, you know? So I'm going to be sending you something in the near future, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, Cheryl, the floor is yours.
I'm just interested because we're older. I want to hear Caelan's point of view about everything you heard us talk about today.
Ooh, wow. Listen to that. Go ahead, young man. All right.
As a younger person, you know, there was a little bit more. I mean, I went to a rural school, you know, rural. So
Right.
more of a white school, unfortunately. There was, I mean, there were people of other minorities there, but it was mostly white. And so
Right.
at that school, you know, there wasn't, you know, you didn't have to worry about certain things that maybe in other schools you would. Um, where is I going with this?
Well, she wants to know about your experience.
I'm
Yeah,
just saying, like,
the
what you thought about the things you heard about prisons and
prison and
what
stuff.
we were talking about, and
It's
whether you even had any idea that that's what it really was.
I have a little bit of
Mhm.
idea of prison and stuff through my mother, who's done work with certain people. I'm not gonna.
Right, right, right.
So I've known a little bit, but it's also interesting to hear these opinions.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you again. Again, wow, what a great conversation. Love the energy. Love the flow. Love what we brought, the narrative. And I think that when people hear this, I always say I do what I do, that if I can affect one or two people listening to this, I did my job. You know, I did my
Right,
chip
thanks.
to me. I'm not going to reach everybody, but if I can affect one or two or three and they go and tell one or two or three, we're doing what we're supposed to do. This is my lane and I'm blessed. You know, some people are living their situation. I'm blessed enough to live my imagination. All right. God blessed me to do this. I thought I was supposed to be in the moving and storage business for the rest of my life and ride off into the sunset doing that, making all kinds of money. He had a plan, you know, but I always say to him, the next time, God, you have a plan, don't indict me. All right. Don't have me arrested for arson. All right. And if you want to use a book, all right, use your book, the Bible. You can reach me. All right. Or you can even use Facebook. But please don't put me through what you put me through this last time. But it made me a stronger person. And it's given me an opportunity to meet people like you who are true soldiers. Michelle, you, Mr. Hamilton, Cheryl, you know, my sister from another mister. And I only hope I can do you guys proud with what I'm doing. Okay, Cheryl, you got 4 minutes. You want to wrap up?
I don't really have nothing else to say right
All
now.
right. All right.
Want
I'm
to
just glad we
record
did
an
this.
exit out segment saying, you know, this has been
Mhm.
this is the end of the narrative. If you don't want to film that, say that.
Nope, I don't have nothing else to say.
Well, then I'll do my ending. Okay.
Okay.
Until next time. All right. This is H. Bosh Jr., Mrs. Inez Bosh's baby boy, and your overcoming adversity specialist, doing what I'm made to believe. I love you. God loves you. I love you. God loves you, and it ain't nothing you can do about it. All right.
Bye, guys.
It's been another episode of Changing the Narrative, Violence in Prisons. Today we had host Cheryl L. Cates, H. Bosh Jr., Michelle Bonet, and Derrick Hamilton. Until next time.